Hey, it's Marius with Get Busy Global. We've been up since yesterday. If you're from Increased Client Flow, welcome. This is just a little series I like to do. It's a book series. I like to read daily. Honestly, if I can finish a book, which is tough on most days just due to my schedule, I do. If not, I try to get at least like minimum an hour reading in a day, just 30 in the morning, 30 at night, and then like whatever else I can squeeze throughout, just like this. So for me, since I already read like that consistently, I figured let me start recording it and like putting it out there as like content. I don't know if you guys have seen, but I've been more active on social media, just literally like recording and posting. I'm not even editing. Like, yo, if you a nice editor, you nice with thumbnails, like hit my DM, hit my jack, you know what I mean? We can see what we can work out. But for me, I'm just more about putting the message out there and just getting it out there as opposed to just letting it sit behind the video. Now, intro aside, this is about the power of habit. Why we do what we do in life and business by Charles. I'm again sorry for the mispronunciation, but Charles Doug. Yo, bro, I'm so sorry I messed your name up. I'm so sorry. But I'm gonna Google it. I think it's Charles Duhigg. He's written a lot of books. This is actually the first one I'm about to consume by him, like fully. And yeah, without further ado, how I plan to do this is I'm going to just read the entire book, like from front to cover. Not in this one sitting. It will be a couple sittings, but wherever I stop here, like next video, it will just pick up from there, like wherever the scenery is. And, this will be on YouTube, TikTok, just those two platforms I've been posting on. Maybe a little bit on Instagram, but definitely YouTube, definitely TikTok. So again, this is Marius Chenikin with Get Busy Global. And without further ado, here's the start of The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business by Charles Duhigg. Prologue, The Habit Cure. She was the scientist's favorite participant, Lisa Allen. According to her file, bear with me, guys. I'm one taking this. I was going to like try to edit it, make it look nice, whatever. I just say, yo, we one takers out here. Like, it don't matter how it looks now, because the message is still the same. So for those of you still with me, thank you. As soon as we get this in nonstop, reading the book, all right? Alright, so prologue, The Habit Cure. She was the scientist's favorite participant. Lisa Allen, according to her file, was 34 years old, had started smoking and drinking when she was 16, and had struggled with obesity for most of her life. At one point in her mid-20s, collection agencies were hounding her to recover $10,000 in debts. An old resume listed her longest job as lasting less than a year. The woman in front of researchers today, however, was lean and vibrant. Guys, work on me my tonality as well. I'm sorry for pausing. One take. The woman in front of the researchers today, however, was lean and vibrant, with the toned legs of a runner. Y'all gonna be like, bro, is this how the whole video is? Nah, honestly. Take 3. Prologue, The Habit Cure. She was the scientist's favorite participant. Lisa Allen, according to her file, was 34 years old, had started smoking and drinking when she was 16, and had struggled with obesity for most of her life. At one point in her mid-20s, collection agencies were hounding her to recover $10,000 in debts. An old resume listed her longest job as lasting less than a year. The woman in front of the researchers today, however, was lean and vibrant, with the toned legs of a runner. She looked a decade younger than the photos in her chart, and like she could out-exercise anyone in the room. According to the most recent report in her file, Lisa had no outstanding debts, didn't drink, and was in her 39th month at a graphic design firm. How long since your last cigarette? One of the physicians asked. Starting down the list of questions, Lisa answered every time she came to his laboratory outside of Bethesda, Maryland. Crazy because, I took that 14-hour drive from Maryland to Tampa. You can check that link in the description. Almost 4 years, she said. And I've lost 60 pounds and run a marathon since then. She also started a master's degree and bought a home. It had been an eventful stretch. The scientists in the room included neurologists, psychologists, geneticists, and a sociologist. For the past 3 years, with funding from the National Institutes of Health, they had poked and prodded Lisa more than 24 Sorry, guys. The scientists in the room included neurologists, psychologists, geneticists, and sociologists. For the past 3 years, with funding from the National Institutes of Health, they poked and prodded Lisa and more than 24 other former smokers, chronic overeaters, problem drinkers, obsessive shoppers, and people with other destructive habits. Of all the participants had all of the participants had one thing in common. They had remade their lives in relatively short periods of time. The researchers wanted to understand how. So they measured subjects' vital signs, installed video cameras in their homes to watch their daily routines, sequenced portions of their DNA, and with technologies that allowed them to peer inside people's skulls in real time, watched as blood and electrical impulses flowed through their brains while they were exposed to temptations such as cigarette smoke and lavish meals. The researchers' goal was to figure out how habits work on a neurological level and what it took to make them change. I know you've told this story a dozen times, the doctor said to Lisa, but some of my colleagues have only heard it secondhand. Would you mind describing it again, how you gave up cigarettes? Sure, Lisa said. It started in Carrier. The vacation had been something of a rash decision, she explained. A few months earlier, her husband had come home from work and announced that he was leaving her because he was in love with another woman. It took Lisa a while to process the betrayal and absorb the fact that she was actually getting a divorce. There was a period of mourning, then a period of obsessively spying on him, following his new girlfriend around town, calling her after midnight and hanging up. Then there was the evening that Lisa showed up at the girlfriend's house, drunk, pounding on her door and screaming that she was going to burn her condo down. It wasn't a great time for me, Lisa said. I had always wanted to see the pyramids and my credit cards weren't maxed out yet, so on the first morning of Carrier, Lisa woke at dawn to the sound of the call to prayer from a nearby mosque. It was pitch black inside her hotel room. Half blind and jet lagged, she reached for a cigarette. She was so disoriented that she didn't realize until she smelled burning plastic that she was trying to light a pen, not a Marlboro. She had spent the past 4 months crying, binge eating, unable to sleep, and feeling ashamed, helpless, depressed, and angry, all at once. Lying in bed, she broke down. It was like this wave of sadness, she said. I felt like everything I had ever wanted had crumbled. I couldn't even smoke right. And then I started thinking about my ex-husband and how hard it would be to find another job when I got back, and how much I was going to hate it, and how unhealthy I felt all the time. I got up and knocked over a water jug and it shattered on the floor, and I started crying even harder. I felt desperate, like I had to change something, at least one thing I can control. She showered and left the hotel. As she rode through Carrier's rutted streets in a taxi, and then onto the dirt roads leading to the Sphinx, the pyramids of Giza, and the vast endless desert around them, her self-pity for a brief moment gave way. She needed a goal in her life, she thought, something to work toward. So she decided, sitting in the taxi, that she would come back to Egypt and trek through the desert. It was a crazy idea, Lisa knew. She was out of shape, overweight, with no money in the bank. She didn't know the name of the desert she was looking at, or if such a trip was possible. None of that mattered, though. She needed something to focus on. Lisa decided that she would give herself 1 year to prepare, and to survive such an expedition, she was certain she would have to make sacrifices. In particular, she would need to quit smoking. We're on the road now, guys. When Lisa finally made her way across the desert in 11 months later, when Lisa finally made her way across the desert 11 months later in an air-conditioned and motorized tour with half a dozen other people, mind you, the caravan carried so much water, food, tents, maps with global positioning systems, and two-way radios that throwing a carton of cigarettes wouldn't have made much of a difference. But in the taxi, Lisa didn't know that. And to the scientists at the laboratory, the details of her trek weren't relevant, because for reasons they were just beginning to understand, that one small shift in Lisa's perception that day in Cariel, the conviction that she had to give up smoking to accomplish her goal, had touched off a series of changes that would ultimately radiate out to every part of her life. Over the next 6 months, she would replace smoking with jogging, and that in turn changed how she ate, worked, slept, saved money, scheduled her weekdays, planned for the future, and so on. She would start running half-day marathons, and then a marathon, go back to school, buy a house, and get engaged. Eventually, she was recruited into the scientist study, and when researchers began to examine images of Lisa's brain, they saw something remarkable. One set of neurological patterns or old habits had been overridden by new patterns. They could still see the neuroactivity of her old behaviors, but those impulses were crowded out by new urges. As Lisa's habits changed, so had her brain. It wasn't a trip to Cariel that had caused the shift. Scientists were convinced, or the divorce, or the desert trek. It was that Lisa had focused on changing just one habit, smoking at first. Everyone in the study had gone through a similar process by focusing on the pattern, what is known as a keystone habit. Lisa had taught herself how to reprogram the other routines in her life as well. It's not just individuals who are capable of such shifts. When companies focus on changing habits, whole organizations can transform. Firms such as Procter & Gamble, Starbucks, Alcoa, and Target have seized on this insight to influence how work gets done, how employees communicate, and without customers realizing it, the way people shop. I want to show you one of your most recent scans, the researcher told Lisa at the end of her exam. He pulled a picture of her on a computer screen that showed images from inside her head. When you see food, these areas he pointed to near the center of her brain, which are associated with craving hunger, are still active. Your brain still produces the urge that made you overeat. However, there's no activity in this area, pointing to the region closer to her forehead, where we believe this behavioral inhibition and self-discipline starts. That activity has become more pronounced each time you've come in. Lisa was the scientist's favorite participant because her brain scans were so compelling, so useful in creating a map of where behavioral patterns, habits reside in our mind. You're helping us understand how a decision becomes an automatic behavior, the doctor told her. Everyone in the room felt like they were on the brink of something important, and they were. When you woke up this morning, what did you do first? Did you hop in the shower, check your email, or grab a donut from the kitchen counter? Did you brush your teeth? Did you brush your teeth before or after you toweled off? Tie the left or right shoe first? What did you say to your kids on the way out the door? Which route did you drive to work? When you got to your desk, did you do an email, chat with a colleague, or jump right into writing a memo? Salad and hamburger for lunch. When did you get home? Did you put your sneakers and go on for a run? Or pour yourself a drink and eat dinner in front of the TV? All our life so far as it has definite form. All our life so far as it has definite form is a mass of habits. All our life so far as it has definite form is but a mass of habits. Okay. All our life so far as it is. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not dyslexic. This isn't a tongue twister. I'm just trying to be better at reading, so bear with me. But thank you so much for being with me. Take a little just gratitude break. I appreciate every single one of you that have listened to this point fully. Like, for one, you people are actually trying to better yourselves and absorb all the knowledge, so thank you. And you kind of just like me, so I guess, that's not me hyping myself up. I like you too, feel me? Yeah, but thank you. So my dad just lost where I was at, so bear with me. Um, all our life so far as it isn't, all our life so far as it has definite form is but a mass of habits. All our life so far, all our life so far, all our life so far as it has definite form is but a mass of habits. All our life so far, all our life so far as it is has do you guys get what they're trying to say? I guess since I'm having such a hard time saying it, I'm just gonna say that sentence and how I interpret it. So basically what he's saying is all our life so far, so all our life so far, so your life until this point, it has a definite form. So I mean, I guess that was in relation to that little paragraph that I just read above, where he's talking about what did you specifically do in your for me personally, I always put my left foot in my shoe first, then my right shoe. When I tie my left, usually my shoes are tied, so I don't even have to tie my shoes, which you know what I mean, so little stuff like that where it varies based on person. Again, he says it's definite in its form, feel me? So that's a definite thing that occurs every single day, and that definite form is compiled of a mass of habits. So these are the habits in that that create that definite. I hope that made sense. If not, maybe it's better I go live on Instagram, and I'll put you guys could request to be live and we could chop it up and go back at it. I'll throw those clips on YouTube and have an honest discussion on how you really take this book and apply it in your life. I wanted this to be a reading session, but I figured if I'm reading for this long and I'm kind of stuttering a little bit, I'll be honest, I might as well just make it where I'm giving my 2 cents on the book as well. So this is not just the read through, but also my 2 cents on what's going on in the book when applicable. But at a minimum though, because I could talk for hours if we decided to stop every time I like something in the book. So with that being said, let's get back to work. All our life so far as it has definite form is but a mass of habits. William James wrote in 1892. Most of the choices we make each day may feel like the products of well-considered decisions. Most of the choices we make each day may feel like the products of well-considered decision-making, but they're not. They're habits. And though each habit means relatively little on its own, over time, the meals we order, what we say to our kids each night, whether we spend or save, how often we exercise, and the way we organize our thoughts and work routines have enormous impacts on our health, productivity, financial security, and happiness. One paper published by a Duke University researcher in 2006 found that more than 40% of the actions people perform each day weren't actual decisions, but habits. William James, like countless others from Aristotle to Oprah, spent much of his life trying to understand why habits exist, but only in the past 2 decades have scientists and marketers really began to understand how habits work and, more importantly, how they change. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first section focuses on how habits emerge within individual lives. It explores the neurology of habit formation, how to build new habits and change old ones, and the methods for I'm sorry, guys. It explores the neurology of habit formation, how to build new habits and change old ones, and the methods, for instance, that one ad man used to push toothbrushing from obscure practice into a national obsession. It shows how Procter & Gamble turned the spray name Febreze into a billion-dollar business by taking advantage of consumers' habitual urges, how Alcoholics Anonymous reforms lives by attacking habits at the core of addiction, and how coach Tony Dungy reversed the fortune of the worst team in the National Football League by forcing his players by focusing on his players' automatic reactions to subtle on-field. I'm gonna read that paragraph again. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first section focuses on how habits emerge within individual lives. It explores the neurology. This book is divided into 3 parts. The first section focuses on how habits emerge within individual lives. It explores the neurology of habit formation, how to build new habits and change old ones, and the methods, for instance, that one ad man used to push toothbrushing from an obscure practice into a national obsession. It shows how Procter and Gamble turned the spray name Febreze into a billion-dollar business by taking advantage of consumers' habitual urges, how Alcoholics Anonymous reforms lives by attacking habits at the core of addiction, and how coach Tony Dungy reversed the fortunes of the worst team in the National Football League by focusing on his players' automatic reaction to subtle on-field cues. The second part examines the habits of successful companies and organizations. It details how an executive named Paul O'Neill, before he became a Treasury Secretary, remade a struggling aluminum manufacturer into a top performer in the Dow Jones Industrial. It details how an executive named Paul O'Neill, before he became a Treasury Secretary, remade a struggling aluminum manufacturer into the top performer in the Dow Jones Industrial Average by focusing on one keystone habit, and how Starbucks turned a high school dropout into a top manager by instilling habits designed to strengthen his willpower. It describes why even the most talented surgeons can make catastrophic mistakes when a hospital's organizational habits go away. The third part looks at the habits of societies. It recounts how Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement succeeded in part by changing the ingrained social habits of Montgomery. The third part looks at the habits of societies. It recounts how Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement succeeded in part by changing the ingrained social habits of Montgomery, Alabama, and why a similar focus helped a young pastor named Rick Warren build the nation's largest church in Saddleback Valley, California. Finally, it explores thorny ethical questions. Thorny, I don't know that word. Let me Google it real quick. I want to keep this going. I don't want to stop. I'm going to have to make note to Google that later. Thorny, that's the word. Thorney or Y? Just Y. It explains, so Thorny. Finally, it explores thorny ethical questions such as whether a murderer in Britain should go free if he can convincingly argue that his habits led him. Finally, it explores thorny ethical questions such as whether a murderer in Britain should go free if he can convincingly argue that his habits led him to kill. Whoa, that's different. That deserves a pause. I think that's like a topic of discussion. I've never heard of that story, but if you guys know it, just comment down below, educate me and whoever else is watching this video on it. We're going for 24 minutes strong, guys. Like, this is what we do. We do this content, feel me? I'm about to upload this as soon as I'm done. Like, it's crazy. I've been talking for this long, and I've only gotten through, like, 3 pages. Like, I've also been talking and stuttering a lot, so maybe, like, when I really get into the meat, because part 1 is in a couple pages. So maybe I'll do, like, all of part 1. I'm really just reading this until my girl get back, because she's doing an Instacart order right now. So, like, when she get back, that's when I'll stop. But we'll see how far I can get into it. Part 1 is only, like, 30 pages, it looks like. So, let's just keep it going. And, yeah. Each chapter revolves around a central argument. Habits can be changed if we understand how they work. This book draws on hundreds of academic studies, interviews with more than 300 scientists and executives, and research conducted at dozens of companies. For an index of resources, please see book notes and thepowerofhabit.com. It focuses on habits as they are technically defined, the choices that all of us deliberately make at some point, and then stop thinking about but continue doing often every day. At one point, we all consciously decide on how much to eat and what to focus on when we got to the office, how often to have a drink, or when to go out for a jog. Then we stopped making a choice and the behavior became automatic. It's a natural consequence of our neurology, and by understanding how it happens, you can rebuild those patterns in whichever way you choose. I first became interested in the science of habits 8 years ago as a newspaper reporter in Baghdad, the U.S. military. I first became interested in the science of habits 8 years ago as a newspaper reporter in Baghdad. The U.S. military, it occurred to me as I watched in action, is one of the biggest habit formation experiments in history. Basic training teaches soldiers carefully designed habits for how to shoot, think, and communicate under fire. On a battlefield, every command that's issued draws on behaviors practiced to the point of automation. The entire organization relies on endless rehearsed routines for building bases, setting strategic priorities, and deciding how to respond to attacks. In those early days of the war, when the insurgency was spreading and the death tolls were mounting, commanders were looking for habits they could instill among soldiers and Iraqis that might create durable peace. In those early days of the war, when the insurgency was spreading and the death tolls were mounting, commanders were looking for habits they can instill among soldiers and Iraqis that might create a durable peace. I had been in Iraq for about 2 months when I had heard about an officer conducting an impromptu habit modification program in Kufa, a small city 90 miles south of the capital. He was an army major who had analyzed videotapes of recent riots and had identified a pattern. Violence was usually preceded by a crowd of Iraqis gathering in a plaza or other open space, and over the course of several hours, growing in size. Food vendors would show up as well as spectators, then someone would throw a rock or a bottle and all hell would break loose. When the mayor met with Kufa's mayor, he made an odd request. Could they keep the food vendors out of the plazas? Sure, the mayor said. A few weeks later, a small crowd gathered near the Mosque al-Kufa, or the Great Mosque of Kufa. Throughout the afternoon, it grew in size. Some people started chanting angry slogans. Iraqi police, sensing trouble, radioed the base and asked the U.S. troops to stand by. At dusk, the crowd started getting restless and hungry. People looked for the kebab sellers normally filling the plaza, but there were none to be found. The spectators left. The chanters became dispirited. By 8 p.m., everybody was going. When I visited the base near Kufa, I talked to the major. You wouldn't necessarily think about a crowd's dynamics in terms of habits, he told me. But he had spent his entire career getting drilled in the psychology of habit formation. At boot camp, he had absorbed habits for loading his weapon, falling asleep in a war zone, maintaining focus amid the chaos of battle, and making decisions while exhausted and overwhelmed. He had attended classes that had taught him habits for saving money, exercising each day, and communicating with bunkmates. As he moved up the ranks, he learned the importance of organizational habits, ensuring that the subordinates could make decisions without constantly asking permission, and how the night routines made it easier to work alongside. I'm sorry, guys. As he moved up the ranks, he learned the importance of organizational habits, ensuring that subordinates can make decisions without constantly asking permission, and how the right routines made it easier to work alongside people he normally couldn't stand. And now as an impromptu nation builder, he was seeing how crowds and cultures abided by the many same rules. In some sense, he said, a community was a giant collection of habits occurring among thousands of people depending on how their influence could result. In some sense, he said, a community was a giant collection of habits occurring amongst thousands of people that, depending on how their influence, could result in violence or peace. In addition to removing the food vendors, he had launched dungeons. He had launched I'm getting sleepy, guys. It's been 30 minutes. I only read like 3 pages. What's going on? Now as an impromptu nation builder, he was seeing how crowds and cultures abided by many of the same rules. In some sense, he said, a community was a giant collection of habits occurring amongst thousands of people that, depending on how their influence, could result in violence or peace. In addition to removing the food vendors, he had launched dozens of different experiments in Kufa to influence residents' habits. There hadn't been a riot since he arrived. Understanding habits is the most important thing I've learned in the army, the major told me. It's changed about It's changed everything about how I see the world. You want to fall asleep fast and wake up feeling good, pay attention to your nightmare patterns and what you automatically do when you get up. You want to make running easy? Create triggers to make it a routine. I drill my kids on this stuff. My wife and I got our plans for our marriage. This is what we talk about in the command meetings. Not one person in Kufa would have told me that we can influence crowd by taking away. Not one person in Kufa told me that we could take away. Yo, I'm falling asleep, guys. Let me finish. Got 2 pages. Not one person in Kufa would have told me that we can influence crowds by taking away the kebab stands. But once you see everything as a bunch of habits, it's like someone gave you a flashlight and a crowbar and you can get to work. The major was a small man from Georgia. He was perpetually spitting either sunflower seeds or chewing tobacco into a cup. He told me that prior to entering the military, his best career option had been replacing telephone lines or possibly becoming a methamphetamine entrepreneur. A path some of his high school peers had chosen to less success. He oversaw 800 troops in one of the most sophisticated fighting organizations on earth. I'm telling you, if a hick like me can learn this stuff, anyone can. I tell my soldiers all the time, there's nothing you can't do if you get the habits right. In the past decade, our understanding of neurology and psychology of habits and the way patterns work within our lives, societies, and organizations has expanded in ways we couldn't have imagined 50 years ago. We now know why habits emerge, why they change, and the science behind their mechanics. We know how to break them into parts and rebuild them into our specifications. We understand how to make people eat less, exercise more, work more efficiently, and live healthier lives. Transforming a habit isn't necessarily quick. the past decade, our understanding of the neurology and psychology of habits and patterns and the way patterns work within our lives societies and organizations has expanded in ways we couldn't have imagined 50 years ago. We now know why habits emerge, how they change, and the science behind their mechanics. We know how to break them into parts and rebuild them into our specifications. We understand how to make people eat less, exercise more efficiently, and live healthier lives. Transforming a habit isn't necessarily easy or quick. It isn't always simple, but it's possible. Now we understand how. And that was just the prologue. I was falling asleep and it took like 30 minutes, but until next time, we're going to start off here. Thank you, guys.